Crazy to have a national Bitcoin reserve is what we just heard from Larry Summers speaking last week on Wall Street Week. What do you make of that? Is it crazy or is it something we need here in the U.S.?
Look, do I think it's crazy? I think that these are, it depends on how you think about Bitcoin, right? And so as we've seen more acceptance, including from the Treasury sector, including from the Fed chair, just to this idea that Bitcoin is digital gold and it functions more like gold than anything else, the idea of a reserve becomes, I think, less crazy, to use Larry Summers' terminology. And I think you have to decide, as a government, and we have to decide as kind of as a global economy, where are we going to put our focus, where we're going to put our attention. To the extent that you thought gold was crazy, you might think Bitcoin's crazy. To the extent you think they're analogous, you'll have a different opinion. So it doesn't surprise me that that's Larry Summers' take on the concept, but I think it's completely reasonable to have a very different perspective on that, as many do.
A cynic might say that doing that would remove supply from the Bitcoin that's out there and just cause the price to go higher, making a select group of people even wealthier.
A cynic or a bull.
Or a bull would say that.
or a bull, yeah, big boulder.
How would you reply to somebody who's a cynic saying, there's really no use for this in terms of the U.S. stockpiling except to make some people really wealthy?
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to this concept of how you feel about gold. The same arguments could have been made historically and also, frankly, probably today. I can't say I'm following who the whales of gold are very closely, but I'm sure there are some outsized holders of gold as well. And I think it all comes back to fundamentally this question around U.S. dollar dominance and how you want to ensure that the U.S. remains the world's global reserve currency. And if Bitcoin can be an adjacency to that and help support that proposition, then, I think there's a logic to that. But yeah, I can certainly see why a cynic or critic of this opportunity would have skepticism about it. And personally, I don't know that it falls as the #1 priority we have in the crypto policy space versus an idea that I think merits discussion and is of interest.
Yeah, I've noticed that, Sheila, a lot of even big holders in this space, Michael Novogratz, for example, don't put a lot of faith in the idea of a crypto reserve. But then last week we heard Vladimir Putin talking about it. And I feel like the first time I ever thought about the idea that countries would use it as a reserve was when the U.S. started to put real restrictions on Russia's dollar reserves. The whole point of this is that no government can censor it, right? And that's what we try and do with the dollar. What do you think we need to do to reach a critical mass? I mean, if the U.S. and Russia start to build reserves, I know it's a big if, but if that happens, I mean, everyone else is going to follow, right?
Yeah, well, look, I'll just say that I think the priority here ought to be U.S. dollar dominance and ensuring that the U.S. dollar, for a variety of reasons, for national security reasons, for sanctions-related reasons, for global macroeconomic reasons, I think that should be a priority. And again, I think there are arguments to be made, and they're being made by some, about why a Bitcoin strat reserve would support that. But I think if that's the focus, the most important thing we could do is land stablecoin regulation, okay? So right now, we know that in circulation, we're under circulating essentially U.S. dollar coins of various kinds, dollar-pegged stable coins. There is tremendous demand for those as the engine of the digital economy. And the question becomes, what is the parameter around which their issuance, around which they're kept? All of those are really, really important questions. And we don't have those resolved in the United States. So in my view, that is extremely and extraordinarily important policy question that remains open. And I'm hopeful that we'll kind of see that resolved in the earlier part of this new administration.